and the fade, the sections of color. So in our chalk drawing, we'll notice that there's a clear lens. We were asked, will we cut that to create that? We're actually gonna make that clear lens right here in this hot shop floor. To do so, we're gonna get rid of the tip of our cone in the center. We're using another break off, a construction made by a tool called the jacks. We're squeezing down both blades to create that weak spot. We are gonna be bringing over clear glass to create that lens on the very tip. What does a flat paddle do? Well, down here we have Dave Walters, and you'll notice that he has a wooden paddle. Right now he is shielding our gaffer, H. Steve McNabb, from any heat that the glass may radiate free at this point. It is entering a chamber at 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit. We could probably cook a pizza and burn it within the minutes inside of this chamber. So when the glass exits, it does radiate a lot of that heat. Why do we have this iconic cone-shaped structure here at the Museum of Glass? Now, we have this cone-shaped structure due to Tacoma's early history. Where we are located, the Foss Waterway, there used to be wigwam burners or beehive burners. Now, Tacoma has a rich history that at one point we were considered the largest lumber industry, and we were considered the capital of that around the world, with over 70 lumber mills in our area. Nowadays, though, that lumber industry is gone, but this cone-shaped structure was made to resemble the wigwam burners that stood in our area. This is just where the lumber industry would burn excess wood, maybe sawdust, or off-cut wood. This is where they would get rid of it. These used to scatter our area, but they are long gone. The closest one is in Aberdeen, Washington, where they still have a lumber industry. I'm not so sure if they still use it or not, however, but there is still one standing. If you would like to learn more about Tacoma's early history and the lumber industry that stood here in our area, you could walk across Tacoma's waterfront. There they have information panels throughout the whole waterfront where you could learn about even the lumber industry and the wigwam burners that stood in our area. They have one dedicated panel just to the wigwam burners on our waterfront. If you're just joining us now, welcome to the Museum of Glass. Thank you so much for joining us. As today's demonstration continues, I do recommend the top balcony. It is a fantastic place to view the live glass blowing action. So the garage is a temporary place where we can store glass and keep it warm. The solid color that we are working with here today cannot be used right away. If we try to stick it onto some glass, it just will fall on the ground and break and crack. If we want to use it, it needs to be preheated, so all our color will be going into the garage to be preheated. If we want to make something in parts, we could also place the parts inside of the garage that will stay warm. We can later bring out one by one to attach it to the center. Now, for our audience that was just joining us, again, we are gathering glass out of the furnace on your left-hand side of the studio. I do want to quickly follow this mass of glass, and we can then go back to the center of the studio. But typically after a gather, as you can see on this side, we are using a wooden block to shape that molten mass. What we are doing is we're ensuring that our core will blow out evenly with even walls. So also, to do so, we are just distributing that hot layer around the bubble. On Monday, I will be taking Frank Barmazy's and class. I don't know. Experiment, I guess. So notice down here on this end how Gabe has pushed that color towards the tip or the clear glass. For this piece, he wants to create a fade, the color being very dense at the tip and being clear at the bottom. To do so, he has pushed all that clear glass towards the tip, which is going to allow the bubble to push forward, therefore creating that color fade. One of the shaping tools we use here in the studio is just the wet padded newspaper. As long as we just keep the top layer, shouldn't leave any residue behind or even catch on fire. Depending on the glass maker, you could use anything from maybe 10 sheets of newspaper till 25 or so. It is all personal preference. So down in the center, we'll notice that we're using a torch. Now this torch is about 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit, and you'll notice that we will use it essentially towards the very back area of our piece. The reason that we use it in that very back portion is that that is the area that is gonna absorb the least amount of heat, which means if this piece is gonna crack, it's gonna crack from that back area. As a precaution to our studio, you'll notice that you hear a weird sound in here, like a buzzing or a whirling sound. Since natural gas is a low burning fuel, you need a lot of oxygen. So that sound that you're hearing is all the forced oxygen rushing inside of the furnaces. If you go to any hot shop powered by natural gas, chances are you're gonna find a very similar noise. So down in the center, we are producing these cones that you see on our floor with our chalk drawings. Down on the left-hand side of the studio, we are doing a stuff. We're stuffing a cup with a core of glass. Essentially, this mass of glass that we're working on your left-hand side of our studio, on your right-hand side on top of the balcony, we're gonna be producing one of our Horizon pieces later during this residency. As we can see down here in this drawing, that cup that we create will ultimately become one of these sculptures. Since we are using a variety of color sections, we are going to begin that process today. However, the vessel itself won't be made until Saturday. Earlier, we learned about our furnaces and how they work and the noise that we hear coming from the furnaces. On a correction, it is just the forced air going inside of these chambers to bring them to that 21 degree Fahrenheit temperature. In the center, we are now going to bring over the punty. Now, the punty is a temporary rod. It's going to be the new handle on which we can begin to work on the opposite end. So it's now time to break free our previous rod by adding a little bit of water on a weak spot that we created earlier in the demonstration. When we begin to open up our vessel from the opposite end, again, we will notice that the inside is a different color than the white on the outside. Hello. Yeah, we're going to be grading these cones. With a little bit of water on the end of the punty, creates a weak spot, and with a slight tap, it breaks free. We can now begin to work on the opposite end of our sculpture. Before we begin to work, however, we take this first heat, this initial heat, and begin the centering process. This is to ensure that this rod will turn on center and on the same plane as our vessel, and it won't wobble. Down on the left-hand side, we're working on our horizon studies. We're bringing over another punty, another break-off rod that we can use. Again, this cup will be used later in this week's residency with our visiting artist being D.H. McNabb. Now, this cup that's produced on that left-hand side will be, again, for the horizon studies, which is the chalk drawing we see on this end, a variety of sections of color meant to resemble sunrise and sunset. So again, to create these, we do need to spend some time creating that colored sections, which we see on this left-hand side of the studio. I do want to introduce our visiting artist once again, D.H. McNabb, working in the center of the studio, and how a residency worked. We have a few questions about that. This residency will last until Sunday. I do invite everyone to come back this Sunday, as our visiting artists will be having a lecture down here in the hot shop floor at 2 o'clock. If you're interested, if you can't join us in person, you can always join us online, where we live stream everything you see on our top screen in HD. Ultimately, we will produce as many pieces as we can. We want to create at least 7 of these cones, again, which will be grouped up later. Now, the primary colors, we hope to be the largest cones. Once then, like the greens and the secondary colors, will be made in a smaller way, just a little smaller than the cones that we produce right now. What will be the size of the cones? Well, we are going to see that right now in the center of the studio. Ultimately, when we are complete with this residency, they're going to be quite large. This piece we're going to see right now, which is a pink color on the inside, which is a secondary color. So this is going to be smaller. The red one, blue, and yellow will be the larger cones. That is really up to our artists to decide how many gathers. When we're describing something to another glassmaker, we're describing something by the amount of gathers we take. So amount of dips we take inside of our furnace. It's typically one way we tell the size of something or describe the size of a vessel. Let's learn a little bit about our visiting artists. So our visiting artist, D.H. McNabb, is coming from Louisville, Kentucky, but originally is from Florida. Now, he has a Master's of Fine Arts from Rhode Island School of Design. And he has taught all around the world and just came back from Pilchuck Glass School. Yes, down in the center, our visiting artist finished teaching a class at the renowned school, Pilchuck Glass School, which is known for glass artists and teaching the next generation. So our visiting artist just came back from there, where he was teaching a class at this year's Session 3. The way that the Museum of Glass works is we invite artists from across the world to come to our museum and continue their exploration of the medium. Now, the artists that we have coming through our doors are a variety. Some of them are glass makers, as we see here today. Some of them, however, have never worked with glass. They can be engineers, architects, designers. Truly, the idea is that they wish to continue to work with. There's a variety of different ways an artist can end up here at the museum. It could be through application. They could win a reward that gives them a few days here at the museum. However, when you're awarded a residency here at the museum, you also are provided with a professional crew. This crew and this full-time staff here at the museum consists down in the center of Mr. Gabe Feenan. We also have Sarah Gilbert working in the center of the studio. The rest of the glassmakers you are seeing here are all hired by our visiting artist. Besides one other student that we have here, we have Jack Spitzer working down in the center. Now, he is our intern here at the Museum of Glass, where he's going to be spending every Wednesday and Thursday here at the museum for the rest of the summer until he goes back to school in September, early September. Well, Nico down here is also hired by our visiting artist. So Nico's actually part of the Museum of Glass Hot Shop crew. And we can see that Nico on the end of his rod has solid color. We are going to begin with the coloring application. So for our audience that just joined us here, if you're wondering how the color was applied in the center, We are gonna see that down on this right-hand side of the studio. Although that color just looks red and orange, it is just distorted by the heat itself. We then take the color itself and place it on top of a beginning bubble. Our next job is to push that color layer evenly around the bubble to create a thin layer of that color itself. When we gather clear glass on the surface, it's going to magnify this underlaying color and make it look solid. Although we now know it's just a small amount of color. We can see some of the properties that glass has. As heat is added to that core, centrifugal force wants to pull the walls of our vessel. Down in the center, we are complete with our second cone. We are now adding a little bit of water on the break-off to create a weak spot, a slight tap, and it's broken free. On its way to the annealer on your right-hand side, where it will cool down for the next 12.5 hours. All right, well, can we give a round of applause to our visiting artist, D.H. McNabb, and also the rest of the crew that we have here helping him out. Now today's demonstration will continue. The beginning process is the coloring application, which we will be seeing being pulled out of our garage is the solid color. Here in a little bit, we're going to apply that solid color to a beginning bubble. As we start this next cone in the center of the studio, I do want to take a second and thank our members we have in the audience for supporting us here and all the programs we have here at the museum. We hope you enjoy all the benefits that come with being a member, like an extra 10% off during your birthday month here at the museum, both in our cafe and our gift store. But more importantly, you are helping out the community. Membership helps support both our Kids Design Glass program, which is entirely free for the family, and also our Hot Shop Heroes, where veterans from our local area come to the Museum of Glass and use glass blowing as a therapy to combat PTSD. All these programs are funded by our memberships. So thank you so much for supporting us in your local community. Well, down on this left-hand side, we are going to be working on a different project. We have on one end a cup, and on the other rod we have a core. We're going to join both masses together. We will break the cup free and set it on the ground. We will then come over with our core we have and stuff it inside of that cup to make our sculpture two different colors. Well, on the left-hand side, the cup is broken free. We then bring over our core using that fresh mass of glass, which will act like glue to fuse both sections together. And we can see that there is now a variety of colors placed in our cup. Down in the center, we are then applying the white color on top of the color. This will give us that white color on the outside, but it's still a color on the inside of our cone. Now, once again, my name is David. I will be floating through the top balcony and also the audience. If you have a question, please feel free to stop me and ask me about the glass blowing process or even our visiting artists that we have here today. Now we have a few questions about the studio and what we offer here. Now I do want to introduce one of our students that we have here on this hot shop floor. Working on the left-hand side of the studio, we have Jack Spitzer. He's a student in one of our local high schools that teaches glass blowing to the youth. Also, at the end of the month, starting next month, we're going to be having students like Jack Spitzer coming down to the Museum of Glass to teach our Make Your Own workshops. So this September, we're going to be making apples. Students like Jack Spitzer will be down here on this hot shop floor teaching our audience, if you're lucky enough to sign up for those classes, how to make apples here at the museum. And if you're interested in participating in being part of these classes, we now have a schedule in our front desk if you want to register for that and have your spots confirmed. Now, again, we're going to be having students like Jack Spitzer, part of this Hilltop Artist Glass program, coming down here at the museum to teach these lessons. Sitting in the center of the studio with a white long sleeve tee, we have our visiting artist, D.H. McNabb. Now, this Sunday at 2 o'clock, our visiting artist will be giving a lecture about the artwork he experimented this week and also the future that holds with this artwork and where this artwork is going to be going. If you're interested in being part of this lecture, again, you can join us Sunday at 2 o'clock. or you can also join us at the comfort of your own home. Everything that you see on our top screen, we do a live stream, both on YouTube and our own website in HD. Well, this small torch we are using on the end of our cone does pack a punch. That torch is incredibly hot, about 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, making it the hottest piece of equipment on this studio. If we overexpose our cone, that color does have a chance of being burnt, and the clear glass itself has a chance of boiling away. So we are careful when we're using that torch to not overexpose the material itself. But it's a good way we can get one small section really hot. We're gonna be adding a clear bit of glass towards the very tip so the piece can be viewed from the inside. To answer a few questions that we have, we snipped off the very tip so we can add a clear portion. This way, the sculpture will be able to view from that angle also. So we see one of the glass makers down on this end, Dave Walters. He has coated his core, or coated that rod with a small layer of clear glass. He's also going to gather more glass to attach to the very top of that cone. Another question we had is about our fuel source here at the museum. We are burning natural gas that brings our ovens to the proper temperature. So as the coloring application happens on this right-hand side, I do quickly want to hit on our equipment that we have here, just so we have a basic understanding of what's going on and what we are using. We use the glory hole, which is the chamber we use to reheat the glass itself, approximately 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit. Doesn't matter what color we work with, when we place it at this temperature, it just turns red and orange. We can even see that with our white color in the center. It sometimes has a hue of orange. We then have the furnace where the glass itself is being brought out of. Our furnace is holding approximately 1,000 pounds of molten glass behind this door. We are heating up a crucible, a ceramic pot of glass, towards that 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit, about the same temperature as molten lava. So we learned that our fuel source is natural gas, and you'll notice there's a weird buzzing sound or whirling sound in here. That noise is the forced air going inside of the chambers to bring them up to this 2,000 plus temperature. Chances are, if you go to any studio powered by natural gas, you're going to find a very similar noise. Well, notice all this shaping that we take here in the center using a mixture of both a wet pad and newspaper, but also just a wooden paddle. At that same time that that occurs, we'll notice that on this end, we're standing by to blow air, but also to place our finger over the blowpipe. When we are shaping the mass, sometimes we can push some of the air out, deflating it. So by placing our finger, we're ensured that none of that air is going to escape and collapse our bubble. If you're just joining us now, welcome to the Museum of Glass. We thank you for joining us. Our visiting artist here today is D.H. McNabb, working in the center of the studio with the white long sleeve. Just want to talk a little bit about our visiting artist. He's coming from Louisville, Kentucky, but he originally is from Florida. He has taught around the United States and the world. With just recently, he finished teaching a class in Stanwood, Washington, about 3 hours north of here, at Pilchuck Glass School, a world-renowned glass school. So yes, he just finished teaching a class there not too long ago, earlier this summer. But here today, we are going to be experimenting and working on these cones that we see here on our floor, these chalk drawings to represent them. We see some of these cones are sitting inside the annealer on your left-hand side. These are still a little too hot to bring out, but later in the day, we will bring them out one by one and lay them out on our tables so we can see the final completed piece. Our hopes and dreams is to create over at least seven of these sculptures that will be joined together, grouped together. We can see that the process is being made right now. Now, the larger ones were the primary colors, being blue, red, and yellow. We have those complete. Here today, we're working on the secondary colors, like pink and green. Those are going to be slightly smaller than the ones we produced yesterday. But once again, we are going to be bringing those out later today, lay them out right on our tables so we can show our audience what we are making. As our visiting artist is working in the center, he has asked for a punty, which is the transfer rod. That is going to be the new handle on which he can begin to work on the opposite end of the rod. So this rod is only temporary. We will now break free our previous rod by adding a little bit of water on a weak spot we created. Even with this new handle that we're bringing over, it's only temporary. which means it needs to withstand any pulling or tugging that might occur, but it also needs to be weak enough to break later on in today's demonstration. With a little bit of water on a weak spot, the crevice that we made earlier, and a slight tap, this piece is broken free, and we can now begin to work on the opposite end. As our visiting artist works in the center, down on the right-hand side, we are creating small sections of cup, small starting bubbles. Now this tube will be broken up to smaller sections, and these cups will enter the garage on your left-hand side. We will later use this to create another vessel that we're gonna be working on here today. But for right now, we are just gonna be breaking down our tube to smaller sections. Just like the vessel in the center, there is a color, a white color on the outside with another color on the inside. If these are left out here, they're just gonna break in a matter of minutes. Now to prevent them from breaking, we're gonna set them in the garage at 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, where they will stay warm enough to prevent any breaking, but not too hot, or the glass can be manipulated by just sitting inside of there. How long does it take to master glass art? That is a fantastic question, and that takes a lifetime. You're not gonna walk into the studio and become the best glass blower in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. It is a lifetime pursuit. There's always something to learn. Now, myself as a glass maker, I've been working with glass for about 8 years. At 5 years, I thought I had a good understanding. I'm like, yeah, this is pretty good. I can do better. And then now that I'm approaching 10 years, I realize I don't know anything at all. There is still so much to learn. The team that you see behind me, they're incredibly talented. Our visiting artist, D.H. McNabb, has been working with glass for 20 years now and has a Master's of Fine Arts from Rhode Island School of Design, which is known to make some really talented glass makers. Gas bill this year. I gotta be honest, I do not know that number. I probably never will. So the pieces that we're creating today, yes, will be similar to the vessels we see inside of our annealer. Right now, our piece just went through a thinning procedure. This is just to ensure there's a similar thickness all the way around. If we realize that that tip is really thick, we can just pull that thick glass and then snip it free. So down on the right-hand side, we're creating these small cups that we will use later today to create these other tubes of glass. The reason why we created this tube is just speeds up the coloring application. You'll notice there's a color on the inside and a white color on the outside. So instead of making every cup with a coloring application, it's gonna make this project really long just because of the coloring. So by doing one coloring application, making that into a tube and sectioning it off, it's just gonna speed it up for us. I have a question. Is the piece we see in the center the piece that we see in our chalk drawing? Yes. This is what we're going to be working on. The larger ones, once again, are the primary colors, being red, blue, and yellow. Those are complete inside the annealer. The ones that we're making today are secondary colors, which is green, maybe pink. Secondary colors, which will be smaller cones than the ones that were made yesterday. And we can begin to see the green color from this side of the studio. But once again, for the majority of today's demonstration, it's gonna look red and orange, and it's due to the heat. How do we incorporate different colors into the glass? The coloring application happens early in the process. The process itself begins by choosing your color, and the color comes to us in a bar form. We can see that our visiting artist has 2 boxes here. There's color inside of here, just filled with different colors. So the first thing is to choose the color palette that we will work with. Depending on what we're making, we could use a full bar, or we could just use a small amount. It's just gonna dictate the density of the color. But if we really wanted to, we could put 3 bars together to make a really dense color. The color itself is made by adding different metals to the periodic table of elements. Different metals produce a different color. To produce blue glass, we may add cobalt. Green glass, we can make by adding chromium or iron, and then maybe black glass, manganese. We could produce color here at the museum. We have 2 furnaces. They're both holding clear glass at 1,000 pounds of it. But let's say we want blue glass. We could add cobalt inside of our furnace, which means everything will be blue inside of there, which may be cool for a while, right? Everything we produce is that same blue, but after a while we'll realize we're making the same color everything. So we melt clear glass, which will give us the ability to use the range of the full color spectrum. How many hours does it take to create one of these cones that we see here? Again, these are cooling down right now. They're still hot to the touch. In a few, we'll actually bring them out and lay them out on our tables so we can show our audience what we produced here yesterday. But these pieces will be grouped together to make one of these collections you see represented in our chalk drawing. I would say about 1 each one. It really depends on the artist. Everyone you see here is talented, very talented. We learned that our visiting artist, he has taught around the United States. We actually have some students of his in our audience also. But DH has been working with glass for over 20 years. The whole crew you see here, since they're really talented, they can pretty much speed this process up. Now, I am a glass maker, but I'm not nearly as talented as everyone you see down here. It'll probably take me twice as long and not as good. Yes. This cone structure we have here, now this was built for the museum. This structure is really iconic to our area, and it's due to our early history. Now, our architect, Arthur D. Erickson, when he was designing this building, wanted to resemble Tacoma's early history. Now, Tacoma at its highest was considered the logging capital of the world, with over 70 lumber mills in this small area. With such a large lumber industry, they would also burn a lot of excess wood, maybe off-cut lumber or sawdust, anything that they wanted to incinerate in these large metal structures. They're called the wigwam burners, and we're gonna show you a photo here on our top screen here. This is what this museum was built after. These wigwam burners did stand in our area, our Foss Waterway, but they are long gone, just like the lumber industry. The closest wigwam burner in our area is located in Aberdeen, Washington. our monkey drawing we have here. A lot of our artists that we have here are artists, so why not, right? We have a lot of chalk drawings laid out. One of our artists also just makes stuff around the studio. So we'll notice one of the most important fundamental rules of glass blowing is to always turn the rod. Everyone you see down here, they no longer have to think about turning the rod. But when you're first starting off and learning to work with glass, turning the rod can be one of the most difficult things to learn just because your hands have to naturally do it without you thinking about it. By turning the rod, we can also use centrifugal force to really begin to pull out the walls and create the clean shape we are looking for. The next step is to cool down our sculpture for the next 12 and a half hours. If it's left out here, it'll get too cold too fast. It can break, crack, or even explode. And it'll pretty much break within a matter of minutes. To prevent it, we will set it off into the annealer, the oven on your right-hand side with the green number 4. It is currently sitting at 920 degrees, and it will be the home of this cone and everything else we produce here today. With a little bit of water on the end of the punty, a slight tap, and just like that is broken free. What a success. Can we give another round of applause to our visiting artist, D.H. McNabb, and this whole Hot Shop crew we see in front of you. We will now be breaking off into our lunch break, so we're gonna be gone for about 1 hour, but remember that your pass, your entrance, is good for the entirety of the day, which means you can grab a lunch of your own. We have a cafe out here. We also have a handful of different restaurants right across the Chicoutimi Bridge. You're more than welcome to exit and then join us back, grab a coffee if you like. We are gonna continue in a little bit over an hour from here. As we break off here, again, we'd like to thank you for joining us. One of our students that broke the piece free, we had Jack Spitzer. Notice he was the student that actually brought over and placed the piece inside of the annealer. Now, at the end of next month, we're actually going to be teaching glass blowing down here at the museum. This is a rare opportunity, but Jack is going to be one of the students. They're going to be teaching how to make apples. Now, these classes sell out quite fast. Do want to give you that heads up. But we now have open spaces available in our front desk, so you can talk to them if you're interested in having your own demonstration, coming down to the hot shop floor, having students like Jack Spitzer teach you how to make some of these apples. And every end of the month during the school year, we're going to be creating something unique and different with our students for our audience. Again, the spaces are limited, but if you're interested, you can RSVP right now with our front desk. Well, this concludes today's demonstration. Thank you so much. Yep, in about 1 hour, we'll be back here. Thank you so much. I can also stay back and answer a few questions that you may have.
Yes. I like that. Yes, he was a shiny old man. I'm John Toriano. I'm from New York City. I have this theory about the attraction of glass, and I think we're genetically hardwired to respond positively to sparkly and shiny things. These are all the teardrops that are the raindrops of the glass gods. It's part of my, just kidding, agricultural aesthetic theory. When you reach in to take a gather, it's like you're reaching into the center of the earth, right? And you're doing something with it. You're making a shiny object. If you imagine a time when, we were just primitive peoples, and you would see a sparkly thing, it wouldn't be very often. And it would be magical because, why? Because you could hold a piece of the sun in your hand. And the sun is everything, right? No sun, no life. I've always thought of myself as a painter first and foremost. With painting, you have to be able to communicate with one shape, something that's three-dimensional. I don't think any artist, for example, can make art without being involved with glass in some way. Maybe it's just with slides of their work, but it's about looking, and it's about seeing, and glass is a very important tool for that. For me, I've never really been a glass artist, but I've always had glass in my art ever since about 1969, I would say, when I was using dots to create the illusion of space, kind of like sky, though I didn't think of it as sky at first. Then I started to look at photographs of the sky in order to get more interesting configurations and distributions of dots. And then because I was looking at those, I started reading about it, and I started making relationships between astronomical ideas of space and painterly ideas of space. And I found that the astronomical ideas gave me more license than the kind of formalist Greenbergian ideas about space did. The project that we're working on here at the museum, I started it a couple of weeks ago at Pilchuck, where I wanted to see what I could do in a columnar shape. Ever since about 1974, on and off, I've been making these column paintings that are half-round lozenge shapes of different sizes. What I tried to do with those is create a paradox between the physicality of them coming out from the wall and the illusionness of them, both physically and visually. And I wanted to see if those ideas could translate to glass. And in a way, I'm trying to make them as close to a painting as you can.
Yeah, and you had a recipe kind of written out.
Yeah. I'm used to working on my own all the time, and it takes a lot more energy to get the momentum going on your own than it does when you have a crew and a group of people. And so one of the pleasures I take from working in a place like the museum here is the kind of communal energy that helps support the process of making work. You don't question it so much. You just go in, you get up, you have your coffee, and you start making work. And that's refreshing. You see what I mean by them being figurative or beings of some kind? Like post-apocalyptic, but with really nice outfits.
Oh, I was studying painting. My painting prof said, well, okay, your schedule looks good here. You've got some 3D classes, but you're 2 credits short. And if you don't have a full load, they won't give you an assistantship. I said, well, that won't do. What should I take? And he ran his finger down the list, and he came to one that said 2 credits, and he said, here, take that. And I said, what is it? And he said, it doesn't matter. It's 2 credits. And it was the second glass-blowing class in America. Experimental class. This is a series of glasses that I've been doing for the last 5 years that we call cameo cut glass. So we came here a year and 3 months ago and blew cups, or blanks I call them, that have colors on the outside and clear on the inside. And then I took them to the engraving machine. I carved through each color down to the color that's below it and make a pattern. These are not finished at this stage. Then I bring them here. We're going to put glass inside the bubble and pick it up and reheat it and blow it out. But this color that's on the outside of this bubble will also be on the outside of the final piece. You can make any shape you want after you've got it all attached. And here are some. This is a cup and a finished piece.
A slight tap, the piece is broken free and on its way to the annealer, where it will cool down for the next several hours.
If I could have my biggest dream come true, it would be that people see me as an artist as well as an educator, so that I can have my cake and eat it too. Good, huh?
Charging the furnace is what we call filling the furnace up with glass. Glass cullet is washed clean and loaded into tubes for filling. Here at the museum, we don't use recycled bottles. Instead, we melt cullet that has been specifically designed to make blown glass art. The primary ingredient in glass is silica sand, or silicon dioxide. The other 2 main ingredients are soda, or sodium oxide, which lowers the melting temperature, and lime, or calcium oxide, the stabilizer. Once the cullet is loaded into the 2300 degree furnace, a rake is used to level the glass for even melting. The furnaces at the Museum of Glass hold approximately 1,000 pounds of clear molten glass and run continuously 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The color in glass comes from adding various materials to the mixture of raw ingredients called batch. Most of the colorants are compounds containing some kind of metal. For example, adding cobalt to clear glass creates a deep blue. Tin and antimony can be used to create white glass, and gold chloride can produce a rich red or pink colored glass. Colored glass is melted in furnaces, just like clear glass, and then is usually rolled into bars for storage and easy application. In order to apply color bar to a bubble, we first need to preheat the color to approximately 950 or 1000 degrees Fahrenheit in a color oven or garage. Once warm, the color is then picked up on the end of a punty rod using a little bit of clear glass as a support. The color is then heated in the 2300 degree glory hole to soften it and make it malleable, while another artist creates a small bubble of clear glass on a blowpipe. Once warm, the color is dropped over the clear bubble, and then using a variety of hand tools or the steel marver, the color is rolled back over the clear in an even layer. This process is called dropping color, or creating a color overlay. Depending on the project, that bubble is then usually gathered over with clear glass and blown into the final form. The finished product may appear to be all made from colored glass, but when viewed in cross-section, we can see that there is only a thin layer of color sandwiched between many layers of clear glass.
Baby monster. Pip is a baby monster that loves to smile and laugh. Even though he's little and cute, he gives a big cry. Also, Pip loves food, especially bananas. He will eat any speck of food in sight.
Totally amazing. And especially if the pieces of art go traveling around, other kids will see, oh my gosh, I could do that too. You know, it's not just somebody else that, you know, they did it, you know, I couldn't do that. Absolutely not. Anyone can do this. And I think that's what it shows the kids.
Maybe not everybody can win them.
But,
I think it's gonna stand up there with one of the coolest things that a museum has ever done.
What is it, a cucumber all dressed up for a night on the town?